click it. All right, we are live. We've got a couple people watching already. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in to one of my first sort of live streams where we're going to talk to various creatives about their process. It's a wonderful sunny Friday night, but if you chose to remain inside and hang out with us, that would be great. So tonight I've got a special treat. I've got my good friend Colin, who's going to be talking about his his photographic project and his gallery show called Faith and Ritual. And I'm just going to bring Colin in right now. Say hi, Colin. Here you are. Thanks for zooming in with me here.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we're all Zoom experts now,
We
right?
are, exactly. So basically, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, well, we'll get to the show in a bit, but what I wouldn't mind doing just for the benefit of people who aren't familiar with your work, if you could just talk a little bit about sort of how you got into photography. Where did the love of photography start for you?
Wow. Well, I mean, it goes way back. I mean, when I was a kid, I drew and cartooned and sketched and doodled all the time, and and then I guess it would have been around. Yeah, I guess it would have been around high school. I went to a really, I was really lucky to go to a good high school, Kildon East, and they had a pretty excellent. I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back at it, they had a pretty fantastic vocational program. And I was really interested, like right off the bat, in photography. And I mean, I kind of joke that it's just, I was too lazy to draw and sketch, and photography was quicker. But and there's some truth to that. But I really was interested in it, partly, well, mostly because at that time, like in the yeah, I guess like the mid to late '80s, there was it was a pretty amazing time for newspapers in the city. Um, Mostly the Free Press that I noticed, although the Winnipeg Sun too. Um, there were some really amazing photographers, and I wasn't a big newspaper reader, but I couldn't stop looking at their work every day, like guys like Ken Gelati and Phil Hossack and Wayne Galaki and Jeff DeBoy and all these great photographers. Um, and it was just like a gallery every day where you could just look at it, right? And to me, I realized over time thinking about it why it was so interesting. It was because nothing is more interesting than to me than real life. You know, I could never quite wrap my head around constructing all these intricate sets and making all these amazing fashion shoots. I mean, it's because it's hard, But I just realized from the start, like it was just photographing was actually going on all around us was just the most interesting to me. So I guess it was a couple of things coming together at the same time, and that was mostly it. So that's kind of where I got sort of the mechanics of it, as well as I get the sort of the direction I wanted to take, like just photographing or documenting real life. Um,
So
I had a couple of years at Red.
the
Sorry.
vocation course at Kildonan East, I imagine it's probably very similar to the one that was at Tech Block and the one that I took at Spurgeon Creek.
I think
So,
so. Yeah.
so was that like intensive, like a 2 hours every day? You're doing photography
Oh
for
yeah.
the entire length of high school?
Yeah. 2 or 3 hours a day at least, as well as a few other subjects you had to take. But I would have been quite happy to take photography all, 6 or 7 hours of the day. And we were really lucky. I didn't know it at the time, but I mean, at that time we had like three full studios, like studio lights and soft boxes and full darkroom where we could develop everything from black and white to color slide film and print it. This is, I mean, of course, before Photoshop, but we could shoot everything from 35 millimeter to medium format to 4 by 5, and I did.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a really good, solid first step. I was really lucky, and it was dumb luck, of course, because I just happened to end up at that high school. But it was the first step. So
When you think about
yeah,
it, there aren't a lot of opportunities for kids of that age to dedicate at least 2 hours of their day to something like that. Like I know, like my son's in high school now, and it's structured so differently. Like we had an opportunity to be so immersed in it, and it really
yeah,
helped us learn that stuff. I don't know about you, but in our division, you know, you could create your own schedule, and I would stack spares so I could actually you know, end up staying in the dark room an extra hour or two afterwards. So
yeah. Our schedule is pretty set, pretty much set. But yeah, we had the opportunity to really focus on something and do something we really really loved. And I think that can happen now, but it's a completely different way. Like I think a lot of it is as students and kids kind of do it on their own, and there's a million different avenues for it. Most of it online or through social media or different websites they go to, which is great. But at the same time, I mean, I don't know. I think 14-year-olds are a lot smarter than we were when we were 14. But at the same time, they're still 14-year-olds, and I think it is good to have someone say, "Hey, here this is." Here's something for you, and just give it over to them, and if it's of interest they can run with it. But it's a different world, so they do things as they will. And like I said, I was lucky to have the break. I think we were both lucky to have the break that we did. But
totally.
it is definitely different. I think attention is a lot more scattered now, and I think schools and people are just a little bit more hesitant to, I don't know, just to give people that chance. They think that maybe it's too much or they'll get bored or fidgety. But I don't know, if you really love something, it's like, I mean, you yourself said you arranged your own schedule to do it more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
So after high school, where did that take you from there?
I went to Red River for a few years, and I basically discovered that I didn't want to be a writer. But it was good because it led to my first job at a newspaper up in Selkirk. It was a weekly at that time. It was like a chain of weeklies, actually.
So this is Creek
And
you took at Red River?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's right. And I sort of got my first break at a small newspaper chain up there. So I pretty much had free reign. It was a weekly, so there's no real deadlines, but you could kind of ease your way into the whole world of getting assignments and planning the next publication and what was going to go in it and how you're going to make these pictures. And so it was a really good grounding. I worked with a really interesting editor who was, I think, kind of a former beatnik. So he was had a really strong kind of arts background, and he was willing to try new ideas and try new approaches. And so we had a lot of freedom, and I got to muck around. I got all the film I wanted to shoot, and I could shoot things the way I wanted to. And back at that time it was film, so I would be making all the prints and working everyone else's film and working in the darkroom. So it was a good grounding. Like I said, it was a good second step, I guess you'd say. So knocked around for a little bit after that, and then ended up at my first kind of big staff job at the newspaper in Brandon. So that was a daily, and again there was a lot of good freedom there. It was a place with a tradition of a lot of a lot of good photography, a lot of good names that were there. I was replacing Dirk Aberson, who was retiring, so that was kind of a Manitoba legend for photojournalism. So he was a longtime shooter, and yeah, again, it was a really great opportunity. It was a chance to really get to know a place and to spend time, just driving around looking for stories and looking for photos. So
I
yeah,
did my work experience at the Sun when I was in Red River. So driving around Brandon
yeah,
looking for photos, I know that well. I know how challenging it is to because you are, you know, Brandon at that time was a very small town, basically. I know it was the city of Brandon, but it was basically a town. And I imagine your
Yeah,
catchment would be outside of Brandon as well, some rural angles. But the
that's right.
challenge, talk a little bit about the challenge it would be to like find those stand-ups in such a small little market like that.
Um, well, it was really frustrating. I've got a little bit of you know PTSD, like photography trauma stress disorder or something. But I mean, it was a good lesson in photography in that you'd spend a lot of time searching and a lot of frustration, but then you would find that moment. You would discover something you never would have discovered otherwise had you not spent so many hours or days searching for it. And that's just a great feeling. It was a great rush. So there's still, images and photos and, you know, um, memories that I have from doing that. And it was a good lesson to have. It taught patience and it taught you the fact that, not everything comes to you served on a platter. You have to really work hard and search for it. It doesn't always come. Um, but it's a pretty great feeling when it does. So it was, you get a routine. You get to know places, and you get to sort of file places or locations away in your head, and think, okay, this is kind of cool, but maybe I should come by at a different time of day, or when the light's different, or different time of year or something. And so you'd have a little, kind of Rolodex, mental Rolodex that, okay, I'm gonna come back here again later. Maybe I could use this later on. Or you'd find a good angle, where the light is really cool at a certain time of day, or any number of things like that that you could turn to. And you got to know you'd form a little map. Like, when you look at a map, there's streets and locations, and I think sometimes photographers can have their own map, or photojournalists, and they think, okay, yeah, okay, there's that alleyway, that's where that big accident happened, or okay, there's that house, that person used to live there. I had this great portrait of them. So you'd have these locations stored away in your mind, these memories. So um, yeah, there's a lot of my time that was spent. We'd have stories, but when there wasn't stories that we're working on, that was up to you to go find something to fill the paper. And it was happening the next day, so you know, it's not like you can just hit pause or say, oh, I don't feel like doing it. I'll take care of it tomorrow. It's like, no, you have to do it today. So it was a little unforgiving, but
Right. We've got some familiar faces that joined us on the live here, and since we're sort of focusing on that newspaper part of your life, James Turner asks, how many hours of the workday was spent searching for some of those stand-ups?
oh
How
boy,
many assignments versus how much was it on your own? That kind of ratio.
it would vary, but typically a pretty fair average would, maybe an hour or 2 hours a day out of an 8 or 10 hour shift, and the rest of the time was almost all the rest of the time is spent looking for things. So it would vary. There's some days where you would just run off your feet. You just had story after story, and you didn't really have time. Um, Most of the time, though, it was the great balance of the day was spent searching for things. Um, and that's, again, it felt like a bit of a curse a lot of times, but um, you did come across pictures, and end up with images that you would never have made otherwise, and some of them would be pretty good. You know, you'd luck out sometime. The irony too is that I don't know about other photographers, or other photojournalists, but for me, I found almost without fail the best pictures were when I was on my way somewhere else. When I didn't have time to stop, and I'd come across something, I'd look out my car window and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And there's a you'd have to make a really snap judgment. Like, am I going to be late for this event, or am I going to try and come back later and hope for the best, or am I just going to say, oh well, and miss it, right? So, and I had all of those my time there. So,
And then on a more technical level, like you went to the Brandon Sun, it was still film, and then it transitioned to digital. Or talk a little bit about
yeah,
that piece of the journey.
it was an interesting time overall. It was an interesting bracket of time because I started out in black and white film and enlargers. We had a Leica enlarger, oddly enough, which is pretty amazing. But you would make black and white prints, and then we went to shooting color film, and we'd scan in the color film and then use those for this kind of rudimentary desktop publishing. And it would be around, I think, early 2002, actually 20 years ago. We got our first cameras. They were Nikon D1Hs, and thought it was amazing. It was a great camera. I mean, to us, it was really quick, and it was good enough resolution for newspapers, and it was fast, good autofocus. It was, I think, the D1 that came out a few years before that was okay, but there were some issues, and I think Nikon really resolved them a lot with that second generation.
Yeah,
And then we,
that D1H really rocked everyone's world when it dropped, I think.
yeah, I think a lot of newspaper photographers had that, and there was a D2H
Yeah.
that was also we used as well. That was also really well suited, and it's so funny. I mean, I remember thinking it was just amazing, and then I look at those files now, and they're suboptimal. Let's just say, right? They're
Yeah.
not very high resolution, and we're looking at cameras that are like half the size and weight that now that have offer what 10 times the resolution or something or more.
Right.
I mean, it's been quite a journey. So it was. I kind of saw it from the sort of old timey days of black and white prints up until digital photography and wireless flash lighting and all of it. So it was nice to. I felt lucky for that too because it kind of taught me that change is constant and you're always going to have to keep learning. Not something I always do, but something that always happens. So yeah, and it was a real change in the industry. I mean, most newspaper photographers then, and it was a real weakness. We didn't know anything about lighting. It was like maybe an on-camera flash, or if we felt really fancy, we'd bounce it off a ceiling or something. And now, I mean, you have soft boxes and just like amazing design and wireless lighting that can overpower, ambient sunlight. And, you can really express yourself just so much more and really have a photo tell so much more of a story than it did before, right? So,
Okay, so one of the main reason we're talking is sort of in celebration of your show, Faith and Ritual.
mm.
I know on this channel here, we've got a conversation you and I had almost, I think it was like 6 years ago. You did that one with the little Meebo camera over at Dim Sum.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I
So,
remember that.
I mean, a lot has changed in those 6 years for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I guess let's start at the beginning. Where did the idea of this project come from? Why faith and ritual? Where did that come
Um, yeah, I'm not a religious person. I'm not. I wasn't raised to be particularly um, religious, but in the course of my newspaper career, I just by the nature of the job, I got to go to a lot of different places and saw a really wide variety of people and a wide variety of experiences. And one, I think, the real root of it was, God, I mean, I think it might have been 2014 or 2015. There was an Ethiopian church that opened in Brandon, and there it was gradually becoming more and more multicultural. And so this is a story about that, about just one more different community in the city that was establishing itself, and this was one marker of that community establishing itself. And they were really warm and open, and they invited me to photograph church service, and it was a really I just remember it was a really moving experience. It was absolutely beautiful visually. You had this beautiful soft window light streaming in from the sides. You had these just gorgeous people with in white robes having their service, and I really liked the pictures I made from that, and it really stuck with me. Although I didn't really follow up that much, but that always really stuck with me as one of my favorite assignments. And I guess fast forward maybe 2 or 3 years, and I was now just established in Winnipeg, and having left Brandon. And I remember reading somewhere about um, sort of an Easter tradition in the Filipino community where they would parade these statues of Jesus and Mary around the block, and the whole congregation would have this procession. And it just sounded really interesting to me. I didn't connect it to the previous assignment in this one, but I was sort of just freshly out of newspapers, and I was still in that mode. So I guess I gave myself an assignment. I just thought that sounds really interesting. I want to follow up on that. So I went to this church, found out what church does it in the city, just approached them and said I was really interested in it, and may I have your permission to photograph it? And they were, again, very warm. They said yes. So I went there Easter morning, the Sunday morning in April. It was a little bit warmer than it is now, but not much. And I was there at about 5:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning, and sat with the congregation and walked with them as they prepared the statues, and then walked with them the whole way as they went out to church and around the block and back again. And it was, again, a really rewarding experience. I loved the pictures I got from it. It was reminded me why I like taking pictures, about how I get to experience life. But again, same thing. It was a one-off. I didn't really think too much of it. I didn't really put it together, but this one really stuck with me. And I started to ask myself why, like, why was this so interesting to me? And then it sort of gradually dawned on me that I like the idea of ritual, about people doing these things they feel compelled to do. Um, and it was across different cultures. And at that time, at that point, once that light bulb turned on, then I sort of went back to that earlier assignment at the Ethiopian church in Brandon. And I realized that the concept of ritual was really interesting, and I think it would be really visually interesting as well. Um, and so from then on, I decided to try to follow up on it. I didn't really know where to turn next, and I think for that, I have to thank John Paskovich, because I mentioned this idea to him. He was really interested in it. He thought it was a good idea, and he suggested I check out the Ukrainian church in the North End on McGregor. So it'd be St. Vladimir's and Olga Ukrainian Catholic Church. And it's a cathedral, really, and it's in name, but also in 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 reality, it's a beautiful building. And I approached the priest there and sat down and told him my idea again, and he was very receptive and welcoming. And I think that gave me the confidence boost I needed to sort of follow through. So um, yeah, it was sort of step by step. It was a very organic process. Um, it was a lot of word of mouth. It was one friend talking to another. It was reading something in the newspaper or hearing about something, and trying to do a little bit of research and finding out where it was taking place. And yeah, once I got pictures out of that event, their Easter celebration, again, it's called Blessing of the Baskets, and in the Ukrainian tradition. And once I got pictures out of that, I realized that this could happen. Like, I could make images across different communities and of different events.
So
And
at
so
that
from then on,
Sorry. So
sorry,
at
go ahead.
that point, was it what had you sort of confirmed that it was going to be a project, or was it still sort of up in the air?
No, it was up in the air up until the point that I came back with pictures that I felt good about out of the Ukrainian church. And I guess that would have been early 2018, so maybe spring of 2018. Um, Once that happened, then I sort of had like I said, a big confidence boost, and I realized that it was feasible. I think the idea could be feasible. It was still very vague and general in my mind, because it is a broad topic by definition. Um, but from then on, it was just a lot of cold calls. I just would try to hear about something, or ask around with friends, or something, and it was mostly just approaching different churches, or people who knew someone who knew someone, and for the most part, people were, all right with it. I was very open. I just said what I was doing. I said I didn't have a real plan with it, but I'd be happy to share any and all, images with them. Um, and that's something I generally try to do too. I try to share pictures, and if it can help them out, then it's the least I can do to say thank you, really. So it sort of was progressing kind of slowly, but it was starting to gather a bit of steam until the pandemic hit, and then all those contacts I was starting to make just kind of dried up because we just couldn't see each other anymore, right? So
Right. It's funny that you mentioned it took like sort of the second story, the Ukrainian service, to solidify your confidence in this subject and
yeah,
give you that boost. And I think for many of us who have seen your work over the years and all the people who are following you would be quite surprised to hear that you didn't feel confident about it. And I think it maybe, for the benefit of other photographers who haven't approached this kind of thing or who haven't had an opportunity to work at this level, just talk a little bit about that, about how after all these years, and I can attest to this, we still feel a little unsure or not exactly 100% confident about ideas and how we need that confirmation a little bit.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's absolutely true. It's everything's a collaboration, right? I mean, you can't just walk in somewhere and snap your fingers and say, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I mean, you need the consent or the buy-in from the people that you're working with. And there's no script. I mean, nothing's a given. They could just as easily have said no. And so you can't really take that for granted. You can't take people's goodwill for granted or the cooperation. They may have their reasons for that too. Um, that's why I try to be as open as I can. But it's definitely a high wire act every time you walk in. Like every time I call them cold calls, but I mean I would just approach someone, a complete stranger, and ask them and just say, "Here's what I'm doing,"
Yeah.
and that's exciting, but it's also a high wire act because there's no guarantee that anyone's going to agree that it's a good idea or that they're
You have any?
under any
Did you have
sorry.
anyone like refuse or basically say no,
No,
not comfortable with that?
no, not at all. They were all open to it. I mean, they were all fairly open. No one tried to direct me. I just basically said I was interested in learning more and hopefully in some way using these pictures to foster some kind of understanding between different communities. I think that was important. And most faith communities, have those kind of ideals at the heart of them anyway, right? Some were much more effusive and warm, and some were a little bit more reserved, but they were all open. They all, I didn't push my way in anywhere. I realized at all times I was a guest in a place that was not my own. So, but yeah, no, it was very nerve wracking every time I went in. It's very nerve wracking every time I go into a portrait session now. I mean, I know what I'm doing, but there's no guarantee that it's going to work.
Yeah.
So I find I definitely get butterflies every time I go in, and that's good, but it's also a reflection of the fact that we only operate with the consent of others ultimately,
Right.
right? So
So then talk a little bit about the process. Like, obviously, the work span different faiths and different
yeah.
events and that kind of stuff. Would you do a little bit of research into the specific event or anything, any kind of background on the faith, or would you sort of tap into somebody else's knowledge and get up to speed on that? Like, talk a little bit about how you would prepare for these events, basically.
I did both. I would hear about an event and I would try to look it up online or read up about it. Often it was my knowledge of it was so vague that I didn't really have that much to go on. I just had the sort of parameters of it, the broad outlines, I guess. And some events and some faiths are just so Byzantine and intricate that it's really, and you're already approaching it from a very vague general outline. It's like, well, rituals. Well, I mean, we know what that word means. It's a simple word, but what does that actually mean specifically? And there's, and like I said, some faiths, like I'll give you an example. I find, I'm sure people in this community might laugh at it, but I found the Jewish faith to be fascinating, but really complex. Like it's really hard to understand. If you weren't born and raised Jewish, it's really hard to understand what, the history and just the depth of feeling and all the sort of intricacies around any number of different rituals, right? And so part of the job involved in this project was just finding the event is kind of an accomplishment, but then trying to learn a little bit more about it, and then trying to sift through all this information to find out, okay, what's the picture here? What is something I can do visually to convey not just this event, but the feeling and the history and the motivation behind it? And and the simplest way of saying it is how can I convey this to someone who doesn't know anything about this faith or anything about this community? What's a way that I can create a picture that will convey that? And that's, it can be tough, and I'm not saying I succeeded. I mean, I hope I tried. I could easily, I will say this, I could go back to any one of the communities that I went to, and I could do an entire exhibition or a book on any of them. There's so much depth there that it doesn't stop at just, one picture or one exhibition.
Right.
I mean, the Ukrainian Catholic Church is, visually beautiful. There's a huge history behind it. The Hindu tradition has got a lot of history behind it. First Nations spirituality has it's a whole world. Um, any number of these could be their own exhibition or their own book, but you've got to start somewhere. So.
Yeah. Well, the show opened last night at Gas Station Theater, and
Yeah.
it was an incredible turnout. It was the work looked amazing. We're going to get into the work right away because I think that the questions will emerge from just looking at some of the work. Before we do look at the work, talk a little bit about where did you get it printed?
I got it printed at Photo Central. There's a number of good labs in the city. I recommend them all, but I just happen to have a history with this one. They've always printed my work, and we've kind of know each other over the years. So they were great to work with. It was a great experience. I'm very happy to support a local business. I mean, photographers, the both of us, and any photographer wants people to support us as local businesses. So, I mean, the least we could do is return the favor. So they were good to work with, and I was really happy in particular with a lot of my prints, and we can kind of get into this with the stuff we show, but a lot of the prints have a lot of shadows, darker midtones,
Yeah.
just the nature of the places I was photographing in. And they conveyed, it would have been very easy, I think, especially if I were printing on my own from a home printer or something, to have a lot of those details get kind of muddied up or lost in the shadows. And they were able to make prints that showed that detail in the shadows.
Then
And I thought that was
that's
important.
exactly why I was asking because I was just totally blown away at the subtlety of the dark tones in a lot of these
Yeah.
images, and especially what kind of paper was it? It had a bit of a stipple to it or something, right?
I think it's a beautiful paper stock. It's called German etching, and
Oh,
I
I love
think it's
German
by Hannah
Hammond.
Mule. Don't
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that stuff. Yeah, and
yeah,
so even with that paper stock to hold that shadow detail, I've printed on German etching myself, and I know how difficult that is. So hats off to Photo Central for doing an amazing job, for sure.
yeah. I'm pretty thrilled with it too,
Yeah,
and especially because I wanted to print them big. They're printed at about 20 by 28 each, and I wanted to show a lot of detail. And you hit the nail right in the head by saying the subtlety. There's a lot of subtlety in these images,
Yeah.
And I saw it on the screen, and I wanted to convey what I saw on the screen to everybody looking, at the prints in real life. And I'm very happy,
I know
and
the pictures
even
I took, like people were almost kind of, they were this far away from the image, really wanted to get,
good.
it just spoke to the power of like these big prints, we both,
Yeah,
both of us love, printing our work big, and
yeah,
it just gets it out of the screen and gets it in the, that scale. It just changes things completely, doesn't it?
yeah. It really does. And I mean, I think we all need. I'm guilty of this, but I think we all need to print a lot more of our work. Um, it's one of those things. It's like saying, oh, I got to get back in shape, or oh, I gotta eat better, or I gotta, change the oil in my car more regularly, or something, right? They're all things we know we should do, and we all, as photographers, know we should print more of our work. It makes it real. And the fact is, if something is on your hard drive, if it's on your phone, if that's the only place it ever lives, is only on a hard drive or only on your phone, it's as good as forgotten. The hard drive's going to get lost
Yeah.
or get corrupted or get accidentally erased or something,
We've
right? But a
already
print,
we've already experienced that. Like you pull out
we've
an old
yeah,
hard drive from 15 years ago and it's dead. Those
yeah,
are gone, right? So
yeah.
yeah, totally. Um,
And
I
when you
like
make a
that analogy.
print, that's
That
you don't need a
I was just going to say I like that analogy that I should
yeah.
print more as the photographer's equivalent of I should get into shape. So so true.
Yeah, well, I'm both, so it's I got a lot of work to do in 2022. So,
Okay, well
but
let's
it's a good experience.
yeah, let's get into the work here so we can really talk about
Sure.
show people what we're talking about. So, explain to us what we see here. What's this image?
Okay, I'm glad you chose this one first because this is a great example of a picture that shows the sort of darker tones, the shadows, the darker midtones. This is from the Portuguese Catholic community. I think the church is called Immaculate Conception Church, and it's in the North End, and it's a really lovely church. It's great people. They were very welcome to me as well. And this came from a friend of a friend. I think a friend's girlfriend actually is a member of this church. And this is a this is an event. It's a procession really, and I think it's called Romeros. And it's a group of faithful that set out. It's an annual event, and they set out to do a pilgrimage of sorts to like 10 or 12 different Catholic churches. And this takes place in the Azores in Portugal. And what this stems from is about 500 years ago this year, 1522. There was a massive earthquake and a lot of aftershocks and things like that. And a group of the faithful sort of did a pilgrimage to various churches to sort of, I guess, directly intercede with God to sort of plead for mercy and if I recall correctly, and I hope I'm not getting my stories mixed up here, but I think at the epicenter of the earthquake there was a Catholic church that had an icon, like a sacred painting,
Yeah.
and it was one of the few buildings that survived unscathed. And this icon, this painting, survived it. So it was taken along on this pilgrimage, and so Portuguese faithful reenact this every year. And so this was, I think, in 2019. It's most of these shots are pre-COVID,
Right.
and or like just pre-COVID. And this was near the end of their procession that year. And I just followed around with them. Again, a lot of these things I try to be a fly in the wall. I try to go along and do what people are doing. Um,
Now,
and
is this the priest or is this one of the sort of pilgrimage? Um,
This is one of the participants. Yeah,
okay, okay. And
yeah.
would you talk to, or would you sort of learn the lay of the land and get a sense of where you're allowed to be and how intrusive you
Oh
can be
yes.
and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, there was a few times where I inadvertently, and I didn't have any serious issues, but I did definitely try to err on the side of caution. I tried to ask beforehand when I was on site and arrived that, is there anything I can't do? Is there anything I shouldn't do? I try to read up about etiquette, where you're supposed to take your shoes off, um, where's a good place to be, what shouldn't you photograph, and I try to prepare myself as best I could, both beforehand and upon arriving by talking to people, and generally too, I just tried to err on the side of caution. I tried to, even if it meant I'd miss a shot, I thought that's preferable to not insulting anybody because the core motivation for me being there is respect and really sincere appreciation that they're allowing me to do this. So, there was no problems that way in different in all the places I visited,
Right.
and a lot of that comes down to just being able to spend the time. I wasn't on a deadline. I didn't, have five other assignments to worry about that day or something. I could spend all the time I wanted, and yeah, I sat through a lot of faith services, start to end. But
Would
that's what you
you
have to do.
would you come up uh, would you come up empty-handed on occasion and then feel like you had to go back, or
Oh,
were
sure.
yeah,
Yeah. I tried to get something every time I went, but in terms of
or,
something that I felt strongly about,
yeah,
not every time.
cool,
I mean, and again, that's just life, right?
yeah.
But,
All right, let's take a look at the next one.
okay. Well, this photo is the one I was referring to earlier that kind of started this entire project or kickstarted it, I guess. This was the event I'd heard about, and I went to initially as kind of a one-off, a sort of assignment I just gave myself. And yeah, it was very moving. It was very beautiful. And this shot really stood out for me. When I saw this, I liked all the photos I got throughout the event. They were interesting, but this shot seemed more iconic, I guess, because it was simpler. There's not a lot of elements here. It's not a very complicated picture visually, but I mean, the light and the mood and the feeling. This is the shot that I think kind of kickstarted the idea that there was something here to this idea. I don't think it was until after this that I realized that it would be a project,
Yeah,
but this shot sort of made me think that there was definitely something to this idea. So
I love the sort of the juxtaposition of the safety vest
yeah,
and the walkie-talkie to to the statue and everything. I think that's so cool.
yeah, I love the houses. I mean, I love the light. It's that
Yes,
dawn light. So the sun was literally just
yeah, I can
starting to
see it up there.
rise as
Yeah,
yeah, as they climbed the stairs, as they ascended the stairs into the church. So I love the light, but I really like the houses in the background. It's so North End.
yeah,
It's just classic Winnipeg North End, juxtaposed with this religious ritual that is happens all over the Philippines. You
right.
know, so I love those two kind of elements kind of crashing into each other. Um, it also reminds me of a shot that John Paskovich got in the last few years where he was photographing a similar event with the Filipino community, but it was kind of a reenactment, and it was I think I can't remember the exact event. I think when in an Easter morning, when the tombstone was rolled aside, and one of the actors reenacting this had a pair of like running shoes on or something, and it was just such a John Paskovich photo. So he had photographed this sort of thing as well in the past. So I think of that too when I look at this picture. So there's a lot of different elements in it for me. So
Right on. All right, let's take a look at this one. Tell us what's happening here.
sure. This is a procession or a parade from the Sikh community, and this was, I talk about trying to do research and trying to, drop in and get to win people's confidence and all this work. This one I found just by driving by the legislature, and I saw a big crowd there, and I had my cameras with me, so I sort of dropped in and realized what was going on and said, okay, well, this is an obvious
But
natural
this, you
for
weren't
my
searching
project.
this out. You just kind of stumbled upon it.
I stumbled upon it, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's testament to
Um,
always taking your cameras wherever you go, I guess.
yeah, which I try to do. I don't always do it, but happily this time I did. And so I talked to one of the organizers, and in terms of showing etiquette, there's an orange covering that you should ideally wear on your head for Sikh events.
Right.
So I got sort of fitted with that, and show I guess to show respect. And I just basically tried to follow along. It was a huge crowd. They were very intent on what they were doing. They weren't too terribly concerned with me, and I didn't make myself into a problem. So by doing that, I was able to really spend time and look at what was going on and try to kind of zero in on what was happening and what the picture would be. And the interesting thing about this picture is I had a lot of photos in this event that I really liked. Um, I mean, visually, the obvious thing is visually, it's just a really splendid culture and splendid event. There's just so much to see and so much color. But there was a couple of photos that I thought for sure, okay, if I ever do an exhibition or something, this is the photo that's end of story. But then when I was really planning for this exhibition, I kind of went through my old hard drives and everything, and I was looking through events on here, and I was kind of scrolling through hundreds and hundreds of photos, and then I came across this one, and just the simple gesture of her hands, really, I found it very moving, and I just realized, okay, this is a far better photo than the one I previously thought. So I think it's good to not make too many firm decisions or sort of say end of story too soon. I think it's a really good exercise to go over past work and old work with fresh eyes. So, and this is a case in point anyway for that. I'm glad I chose this photo. I think it expresses this event and the feeling behind this event a lot better than the ones I did before. So,
Right on. Yeah, I think wow, that's a real testament to, like you say, you're looking at your work with fresh eyes, or what you think is the keeper when you leave the scene, and then when you get back and look at the stuff, you go, "Oh, wait a minute, there's this one actually more," right? So,
yeah, yeah, it's easier said than done, that's for sure.
yeah.
But
Um, and 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 then in terms of like, since we're talking about it, like in terms of editing, like talk a little bit about that process, about how you know how do you put together a body of work like this? Like, do talk about how
oh boy,
a process of elimination, or is it
yeah.
I need to fill these holes, or how does that work?
It's kind of all of the above. I mean, it's the first thing I did was I sat down with the work and just went over it and sort of gave myself a headache, and then I reached out to a few friends. James Turner, who was just commenting earlier, I kind of sat with him and had a few 4x6 work prints made up of all these events that I thought were kind of contenders, and there was no real common thread, but it just pictures that I liked from every event. And we sort of made a selection. So we had we whittled it down. And then I sat down with Hugh Conacher, who is a pretty great artist in his own right and is with the Gas Station Theater. And he had some great things to say too. So I sort of put those things together, and then in conversations with you and other friends and little snippets of things that we said, I sort of put all this together, and I sort of came to realize that I wanted a visual thread to run through it. I mean, the subject matter of rituals is pretty broad, but I wanted there to be something of a visual thread common throughout. So I tried to look for photos that were, like I said, darker in tone. Not in tone, like in subject matter, but just darker in terms of light, shadow, um, midtones, that sort of thing. And I saw a common thread emerge with that, and I felt it was the right thing to do. So once I had that sort of prism or those parameters set, then I was able to that really sped up the editing process and really helped me make selections that I was confident in.
Was
Before, I just kind of felt like I was spinning my wheels a little bit, you know.
was
Um,
I'm just going to scroll through what I've seen already, but was focal length one of the sort of the parameters? Because I noticed like some of these, like this seems like a really wide kind of, or maybe not,
yeah.
you know.
No, that 90 or 95% of the pictures that I took were very simple, small prime lenses. They were a 35 millimeter lens and a 50 millimeter lens. And that's it. There was, I think, one shot that I used a 24 millimeter lens with, and then maybe I think one shot that I shot with an 85. That's a 24 millimeter lens right there, that
Right.
shot there. Although it is cropped in a little bit, so I probably could have used a 35 millimeter lens.
And then,
But yeah, for
and
the
then
most part, there.
something like this image. What would be
Yeah, I think that's a 50 millimeter if I recall.
okay?
Yeah.
But you
Um,
weren't when you approached this project, you didn't put any kind of technical parameters on yourself, like, or you know,
no,
some photographers
no,
end up going, "Oh, I'm only going to use this lens or this film stock," or
no.
you know that kind of thing. You just documented things, and then through the process of
Mhm.
editing, you found kind of its thread.
Yeah, I wanted to travel light. I wanted to shoot available light. So that to me meant small, fast primes. Um, I was originally going to shoot this on film, but I just realized a lot of the places I'd be photographing in were just too dark, and it just wasn't. I'd just be missing so many things by photographing on film, as much as I love the medium. So I just ended up shooting with digital, and it was the right choice because I think it was quieter. It let me photograph like get really quality images out of places that were quite low light, and it allowed me to shoot at really wide apertures like 1.2, 1.4
Yeah.
in places that were in low light, so I could be more unobtrusive. So that led that those sort of demands, to be quiet, unobtrusive, that led necessarily to the technical choices that I made, and that in turn led to the look of the exhibition. So I don't know if you want to call that personal style, but it was just something that um, I sort of did out of necessity. But
Yeah.
I also like how things look in those focal lengths. It really seemed to fit this idea. So for the most part, I would show up. I'd have a really small camera bag. I'd have one camera body, maybe two lenses with me, and just work really quickly and quietly. So yeah.
We got one more example that we were going to talk about. So that like is a perfect example when you talk about low light, I imagine.
Oh yeah,
You know, because
yeah.
this is just tell us what's happening here. What's this about?
This was at a North End Hindu temple, and this is for the festival of Diwali. And this is it's a big event, maybe the biggest event in the Hindu calendar. And it's got the classic themes of light triumphing over darkness and knowledge and wisdom triumphing over evil and those sorts of themes. But this was a Hindu priest, and it's called the Festival of Light because a lot of candles and oil lamps are used to symbolize that. So happily, I mean, I wasn't scared of low light. I wasn't scared of really low light levels because of the gear I was using, and that kind of freed me to sort of really focus on the moment a lot more. And yeah, I just this was a very simple shot. There was a lot of pictures that I had from that event, and a lot of pictures that I really liked. This was a hard choice to make because there was just so much there, but this is one I feel confident in because it's a it's a simple, quiet image, but there's a lot of I think a lot of power behind it. It shows the really deep devotion that I think is held in this community for this ritual. So.
Um, we've just sort of looked at four examples. How many images make up the entire body of work? Would you say?
In this exhibition, there's 15 pictures. So I narrowed it down from, you know, dozens and dozens of events and hundreds of photos into just 15 here. I mean, I had so many outtakes and pictures that I really loved that I could, get another exhibition out of or a small book out of or something. Just, but I wanted to keep it, within 12 to 20, I think, for an exhibition, because it's a fairly humble, small exhibition, and so I wanted to have around that number. So there's 15 in total, and
And
they're
then
all
you've
printed
also,
large.
excuse me, you've also printed a catalog. It has a few more images in it, I think, right?
Yeah, this is a small catalog here. Um, this was done with a printing company out of Toronto, so I tried to use a Canadian company. Really happy with them. It's the prints look great. There was no problem matching the screen, the calibration or the densities or anything like that. Even on tough images like this, it showed a lot of the subtleties and, pardon me, in the shadow areas too. So I was pretty happy with how it turned out. Um, but there are a few outtakes. I had a few pages to play with, so I decided to just add a few outtakes and give people a little bit something extra for picking that up. So
Are those still on sale at the venue, or how would people get those?
they are on sale at the venue. So if they drop in there, um, the gas station theater, it's in Osborne Village, and it's open weekdays. I believe it's 9 to 4. I should say too, sort of make this a big plug, but if the door might occasionally be locked because there's only a limited amount of staff working there, but there's a doorbell. So just if you're going by, just ring the doorbell or the door buzzer, and someone will let you in, and you can have a private screening, I guess. But you can pick up this booklet there. If you wanted to purchase it, you could contact me directly by email. I can or through my Instagram or anything like that, and I can help set you up. So, yeah.
Right on. Um, I've got a couple questions that were submitted from some people that we could maybe go over.
Sure.
Uh, John had asked, "Have you ever had an aha moment with a photo? If so, which one?" So, is there ever a moment where you just, the minute you captured it, oh man, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a lot with this project. One that I remember just off the top of my head, the one that I remember was at the Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral, and it was during that event, the blessing of the baskets, and the former priest at that time, who sort of really that I first talked with. Um, he was kind of walking slowly through sort of a packed cathedral, and he had a little shaker kind of thing, and he was kind of dousing holy water on the baskets, the Easter baskets people bought. A really beautiful event. And he's a very stately looking guy. He's almost like an academic or something, but he had these really ornate robes and very solemn event. This is a really big event in that culture. And so he's slowly, making his way, down the aisle. And then there's a little boy, a really funny looking little kid. He's about 10 or 12. And there's this moment, I'm looking at this the viewfinder on my camera, and there's this moment where you could just see this imposing old priest kind of look at this little kid, and then he just took his water douse and just kind of doused the kid, like kind of squirted him with it, and he kind of smiled, and they were both. I actually got a picture of it where they were both kind of smiling at each other at this joke. I just thought it was so great that this guy could be a little kid and just connect to a young member of his congregation like that, almost like one playful soul to another. So that was kind of an aha moment. That was a really fun moment, like a really totally unscripted bit of real life, that the kind of thing that I just absolutely love photographing. But it's so rare because by definition you can't plan for it, right?
Yeah, and I imagine they're just so fleeting as well. So you're always like
So
you would
fleeting.
have to
Yeah.
always be on, right?
Yeah, there's one photo that is included in the exhibition that is an aha moment. Like what John's saying is there was an event. I photographed a mass there, and I was just waiting, sort of at the back of the church, just to talk to the priest and ask. I think I wanted to ask him about something that was happening next week or something like that. So I was waiting for him, and he was talking to this older woman, and so I was waiting for them, and I had my camera there with a 35 millimeter lens. I just remember that, so a very slightly wide angle lens, and then totally again unscripted, he just sort of gently took her head in his hands, and he touched foreheads, and it was this really gentle, beautiful moment of connection between these two people in the faith that they shared. Again, totally unscripted. There's no way you could have predicted that. It's not something that happens. It was just an expression of who this man was, this really generous, warm spirit that he has. And so again, I sort of raised my camera. Mercifully, I had it set at the right, because I always shoot on manual, and I happened to be in the right setting. So I just raised it up. I saw this thing happening, and I knew it was going to be a split second, not even a second long. And I was shooting wide open, so zero depth of field. Click, and I was so nervous about it. I couldn't bear to look at it until I got home, because I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I missed it. But happily, I got it, and it was just the perfect framing, because it showed the surroundings they were in, and yet this connection that they had, these two people had within this vast space. So that was a big aha for me. That was a really wonderful moment, you know.
It's funny how I think I was telling you this earlier today about how a couple of the other photographers reconnected at your show. Um,
Yeah.
where they last saw each other was at the ledge, I think, for one of the Ukrainian demonstrations in support of,
Hmm.
and how they weren't able to actually get to talk to each other because every time they looked at each other, they were so in the zone and so focused on keeping their eyes open for the next image. And obviously
Yeah.
that's the kind of approach in this instance for this body of work. You would have to be just always on and just
Yeah.
constantly working the scene like that, right?
Yeah. You have to be. The ideal for me is when I sort of leave myself completely behind. I don't think about myself. I don't think about what I have to do later that day or what happened last week or anything. Like I just, it's like become a ghost or something. I sort of cease thinking about myself, and I just completely immerse myself. So that can be very meditative.
Yeah, I was just going to
Um,
say that's the Zen part of photography right
yeah.
there. When you get into that zone, it's a unique feeling that you're always sort of trying to get again, on the next shoot, right? So,
It is really addictive, and the really wonderful thing about it for me is that all these distinctions that we sort of seem to put up in today's culture, that your nationality, your gender, your this or that, your age, all these differences or sort of barriers that we put up with each other, that totally fades away, because there's times where um, that's happened, where you've been in that zone where you really truly feel invisible. And there's moments that happen in front of you that you think, well, that shouldn't happen. I stick out like a sore thumb here. But you're so, I think, in communion with your surroundings that all those distinctions and those differences kind of fade away. And that's something I really, really appreciate a lot too. So it's it is addictive. That's a good way of looking at it. It is very addictive, because you really do see the beauty in life and in other people. I mean, it's easy to be cynical, and I sort of am that way often myself. But I think what understanding and what patience I have comes from carrying a camera. Like, I don't know. I'd like to think I'd be the same kind of person if I weren't a photographer, but I don't know if I would be as patient or think about the things that I do otherwise if I didn't. Because photography, if you want to really pursue it, it asks you to be those things, to be curious about other people, to at least try to be empathetic, to consider other viewpoints, or what it's like to be other people, right? So And just to think about how they feel. I mean, you're certainly more experienced at making portraits than I am, but when you make a portrait of someone, you want to express some positive attribute about them, how they see themselves, how they want others to see them, and that requires empathy and trying to put yourself in that other person's shoes. So, it's I guess aha moments take a lot of different forms, and it's a gift that photography gives us, right, to do these things. So.
So, in terms of this body of work, faith and ritual, um, do you feel it's complete? Do you feel you're done, or do
No,
you feel like
no,
are you going to continue to pursue this project and add to it?
definitely, yeah, yeah. It's what I can't remember who mentioned this to at the show opening last night, but it's something that I could do for the rest of my life because it's such a broad topic and it's a big world out there, right? Like, I mean, all these pictures that were made in this exhibition were made right here in Winnipeg. So all these different communities, Buddhist monks, Hindu priests, Catholic, bishops, and all these different kinds of people were right here in Winnipeg. But it's a big world out there, and you know, it's a little daunting, and at the same time, I'm not quite sure where I would take it because it's you could go around the world, right? You could photograph Shinto rituals in Japan that they've done for 1,600 years. You could, go to stone churches in Ethiopia that were there from the earliest days of Christianity. You could go to, anywhere around the world and get literally centuries or thousands of years of tradition. So yeah, it's definitely not done. I think this would be a first step because it's a really interesting, fascinating topic, but it could just go in any number of different places, right? I mean, and that's just faith rituals, right? I mean, there's rituals that people do in other facets of life too, right? So it's a broad topic, which is exciting, but it's also kind of daunting because it's like, oh my God, what do I do now? Right?
Well, I
Well,
imagine there's probably now that the work's out in the real world and for
hmm.
everyone to see, there's probably you're probably getting people approaching you and going, "Oh, you know where you should go? You should go to."
Oh God, I hope so.
Yeah.
Please,
Yeah.
please tell me that. If you're listening to this and you know of something that is, a ritual, definitely let me know because it's such an organic process and it's been the best experiences have come from word of mouth, and I really rely on that because I don't know anything about Ethiopian Coptic churches or Eritrean Coptic churches or Muslim mosques or something like that. I mean, it's not something that I know about, so I really rely on the sort of goodwill and information from others to really find out about these things. So yeah, I absolutely please.
Well, hopefully, um, maybe something like people watching this video will be inspired to share some ideas.
That'd
Uh,
be nice.
James has got a question. He's asking what advice for schlubs like me who struggle with ideas but maybe want to make stories like this? So, for someone like yourself with so much experience in terms of storytelling and, you know, formulating stories out of images, what kind of advice would you give, people who are just starting out in their photographic journey about, you know, finding a way or finding an idea and honing an idea into a larger story?
I went to a photojournalism conference years ago, and Andy Clark was sitting there. I mean, photojournalists know who Andy Clark is. The guy's a legend, and he was giving a talk about being a photographer, and he said the best advice he could give is shoot, 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 and shoot. And it really is true. I mean, I was talking with there's a guy Trevor Marcelo, who's
Yeah.
a dolphin shooter. Really interesting guy. He's just has always done really interesting work. And I remember talking to him sort of at the beginning uh, of this project, and we were just kind of talking about things, and I mentioned this, and I said, okay, I don't know what to do. I know I've got an idea here. I just don't know quite where to go with it. And he gave really good advice in saying, well, just make good pictures. Like it'll come to you. Make enough good. Just start out making good pictures that you like, and the story will come. And I can't speak to that for everybody, but for me, that's certainly been the case. I just started out with a sort of a germ of an idea, and I tried to build on it as best I could, and I just tried to make pictures that I liked from it. Just even individual one-off pictures, individual pictures that I liked. And you do that, and then you do it a little bit more, and then you do it a little bit more, and it slowly comes into focus. It's like, do you ever see those newspaper pictures or printed pictures where if you look really, really closely, it's just a bunch of little dots, like the halftone pattern? And if you just look really closely, it's just a couple of dots. It doesn't say anything, but as you slowly start to zoom out, there's more and more dots added, more and more dots. And eventually those dots become a really high resolution, clear picture. And that, I think it's a good metaphor for this. Like I said, I've only been doing this for 4 years. So it sounds like a long time, but it's really not, because it's been something I tried to do on the side while juggling life, but it's, I would say tenacity, just resilience and tenacity, and just keep doing it, you know.
But when you were saying shoot, 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 I know I used to get students from Red River would come and interview me for advice, I guess, and the first thing I would say to them is, I can guarantee you, you're not shooting enough. Like I can guarantee you're not shooting enough.
You're right.
Feel like we were shooting enough when we were in school, and we didn't have to maintain our social profiles and websites and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You and I shot tens of thousands of feet of HP5 just and
easily.
still didn't feel like we had photographed enough. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine, people starting out if they with digital, ironically, I don't think, the next gen coming up focus on just pure photography, like the sheer volume of it.
Yeah. Well, I think they can. They've got all the tools they need to do it. Um, I mean, when you've got digital, if you just focus on making pictures, you can do it a lot more cheaply and not have to worry about paying for film or paying for developing, unless you want to shoot film. But if you're shooting digital, yeah, you can just make a ton of pictures and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think whether you're old or young or shooting film or shooting digital, and that really is the key, is just keep on shooting. Like the 10,000 hour principle, or whatever, 10,000 hours or 10,000 days or something. I don't know, but
And
it
10,000
really,
feet of HP5, basically.
yeah, pretty much, yeah, or 10,000 hard drives stacked up.
Exactly.
There's something to that theory. It is true, right? I mean, that's just how our human brain is made. Like we need to do something a lot to really build. I'm not going to say any expertise because I'm not an expert, but just some sort of sense of greater knowledge that you have, right? Or greater familiarity. Like I've done this idea enough that it's like, to me, it's the first step, but I've done it enough that I'm confident that there's an idea there and I have an inkling of an idea of how to pursue it. So it just gets easier and easier the more you do it. So that's what I would say is just, I mean, I base that on what's happened to me and my experience, and I base it on other photographers that I've talked to who said the same thing. That just, you look at some bodies of work that were, years in the making, or photographers. Like I'll give you an example. One of the really amazing photographers is a woman out of Edmonton, Amber Bracken, who has been photographing First Nations issues, especially the conflict with land rights and resource development, and where those two worlds clash. And I mean, she just literally, well, she just won a World Press Photo Award for one of her pictures. And but that's an expertise that comes from knowing that subject matter and making those connections and spending many, 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 many hours getting to know the issues and getting to know the people and really having a passion for it. And it shows through in our images. So that's a case in point right there too. So it's not just me saying that. That's just every time I look at someone who's done a project that I really love or respect or has gained to me some kind of expertise, it's come from a long time building that knowledge. It doesn't just come by snapping your fingers or it comes from really putting in the work. But anybody can do that. That's the beauty of it. If you're 19 and just starting out or whatever, great, terrific. You've got some great tools at your disposal where you can spend time and make those pictures and build that knowledge. Anybody can do it. You just have to want to do it.
I've got another comment here that'll speak to you in a very distinct way. Kyra's talking about how she had the restriction of the film days because overthinking, inertia, analysis paralysis, because of the no limitations and limitations
Right.
work. So it's almost like, again, the analogy is, when we grew up, we had 3 channels on TV. Now people can't decide what they want to watch on Netflix because there's too many things to choose from.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good
So
point.
I
Kyra.
keep
That's a good
referencing
point.
that those bulk rolls of HP5, but to be honest with you, that was our restriction. It was the cheapest way we could make photos,
Yeah.
and then we knew that film once we were into it, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, restrictions can be good. They can force you to be creative and force you to really ask yourself questions like, do I really want to be doing this? Do I really love this? And those are questions I think any photographer should ask, right? Do I really want to do this? Am I doing this because I think I should be doing it, or I want to be trendy or cool, or do I really believe in this, right? I mean, the good news for for Kyra and anyone who thinks like that is you can do both. Like you can shoot film, and you can still have those restrictions. If all you have is a digital camera, that's no problem. Just get I mean, what are the average card sizes now? Like 64
Right.
meg, 32
Yeah.
gig or something. Just get like a 256K card, so you only have like room for 20 images on your camera,
Yeah.
and or just limit yourself to 20 images and say that's it, right? I mean, there's all sorts of creative ways around it or creative workarounds. But it's a very good point. I mean, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when back in our film days, if someone would have said, "Hey, we can give you this camera, and you'll never have to buy another roll of film again, and you can shoot 10,000 pictures and reuse a card and shoot another 10,000," like I thought we died and gone to heaven. It
Well, I
would be
mean, even the
incredible.
the, the idea that, you know, I mean, you can relate to this sentiment where you're at frame number 34 and you go, okay, should I roll this one back and put in a fresh one because suddenly something's going to happen? Like you had to make
Yeah.
those kinds of hard decisions all the time.
Oh yeah.
And of course, but the minute you're rolling back that roll, things start to unfold and you're scrambling
Every time.
to stuff that next roll of film in. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the like you say, there's so many different ways to
Yeah.
to give yourself these challenges, these creative challenges for sure.
Yeah. The grass is greener on the other side of the fence, right? Like I said, if you have film, if someone told you about the advantage of digital, you'd think it would be, that's all I ever need. And if all you have is digital, you think, wow, I could really benefit from the limitations of film. So
Yeah.
there's a really good film called Midnight in Paris. I think it's by Woody Allen or something, but it stars, oh God,
That's
who does
one
it
with Owen
star?
Wilson or somebody.
Owen Wilson,
Yeah.
yes. And the central idea behind the film is the fallacy of this idea that the good old days were the good old days. Like it was always things are always better, 20 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And the point of the film is like, well, no, things are pretty good right now. You just have to be aware of it, right? And be open to it. So, I mean, like I said, the good thing is you can shoot film now and put those limitations on yourself if you think that will help you grow and develop. And, you can shoot digital if you want to learn the lessons that can come from using that medium too, right? So it's a pretty good situation to be in right now to have those choices, right?
Well, it's like we were talking about the other day, this is an amazing time to be a photographer in terms of
Oh yeah,
the lack of barriers, the low entry level,
yeah.
and the plethora of gear. Like I look around at the gear that I'm using here tonight, and even 5, 10 years ago, this stuff would have been way more money, and
Yeah.
less attainable. Like now, it's like you can have stuff brought to your doorstep. You can retrofit every piece of glass ever made onto whatever body you have. Like these are
Hmm.
really exciting times to be a photographer right now. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
probably one of the reasons why I wanted to start talking to photographers on YouTube, just to remind ourselves about how like amazing it is, where you can you know buy an amazing camera for relatively you know little money and create some amazing images. It's amazing,
Yeah.
So
I have to adjust my equipment here and turn on a secondary light. Do you
yeah.
mind if I
Well,
take a
you
second
know
off
what?
camera?
I think we're probably getting to the end here.
All
As
right. Okay.
anyone can tell by the way we're going on here, I'm just looking at the time. It's already been an hour and 20 minutes. If
It
you know
doesn't feel
Colin,
like it.
and if you know anything about me, we love to talk about photography, and we'll do this all the time. And I think before I close out, that's one sentiment I wanted to share, and I know you're going to agree with me, but we're always open to talking to other photographers, the next gen, other people who are hobbyists, whatever. I love it talking about photography
Absolutely.
with other people. So if anyone here is watching this and feels that they've got a large project or a story, or even just want to figure something out, and you want somebody to give you some sort of critique or a little bit of advice, or if you're just looking for anyone to talk to about this kind of stuff, I know I'm always open to it. I know Colin, I've seen Colin, talk to other photographers all the time. I think as we
Definitely.
as we enter this part of our careers, we realize that I know we both have benefited from talking to, you know, the shoulder. We stand on the shoulders of giants kind of sentiment. We had other guys who spent the time with us, so we're always open to giving back to anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mentioned earlier about the photographers of the Free Press who
yeah,
really gave me a lot of inspiration and a lot of great advice
amazing.
and yeah, it was. I mean, I couldn't believe it. There was, two newspapers when I was in kind of that formative part of my earlier life, and they would compete with each other, and there was just interesting guys doing interesting work, and it was, yeah, it was a really lucky situation to have, and I benefited from that. And there's some really cool stuff that I see younger students do, right? There's a couple people on Instagram with the U of M Photo Club who are doing some pretty amazing stuff, and that's a total passion play. They're doing it because they really want to do it, and it's just so great to see that because they're doing really cool work because they really love it. And there's a bunch of other photographers in the city that are doing this as well and making images because they love it as well.
Yeah.
So,
I, I'm
it's,
I'm hoping I can, convince some of them to try a forum like this where we can talk about it, and because like you say, going back to that idea of getting that little confidence boost when people are genuinely curious about your work, it just fills you up and gives you that drive to get out there and make more images, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's a labor of love. Absolutely.
for sure. Okay, well, Colin, thanks again for agreeing to being part of this and having this conversation. Congrats again on the exhibit. I thought the prints were amazing. I loved
Thank
how
you.
they were all together, and it was a
Thank you
testament
very much.
to you and your work and how it brought so many of us together yesterday on the opening. But if you haven't seen the show, make a point of getting down to the gas station theater, ring the doorbell if you have to, but get in there and see those prints, those real prints. They're amazing. And um, all the stuff, I've got details in the description, links to Colin and that kind of thing. You can see more of his work here. I'll just show you. He's got a website. You can see more of his work. I think eventually this faith and ritual work will live online somewhere, you think, maybe?
Definitely, yeah. I'm going to add it. I think maybe when the exhibition comes down in about 2 months, I'll add it to my site, and I'll add a lot more of the outtakes and hopefully some new work. I'd like to start shooting some new work now. Actually, I mean we're
Yeah.
right in the at the very beginning of Ramadan, which I tried to shoot a few years ago, and I never really got anything that I liked out of it. I'd like to try to change that. The Muslim community has been just really welcoming and warm, and some of my favorite pictures have come from that. So I'd like to pursue that. I'd like to photograph Eid afterwards.
Right.
Easter is coming up. I'd like to photograph that. And there's any number of events coming up in any number of different communities. So like what you said earlier, if somebody knows of something that they think could be included in this, I would love to hear about it. I really count on that to a great degree, and I'd just be so grateful for it. And I'd like to have a lot more different communities. I like to have a lot more representation from African cultures and African faiths. I did a little bit of that with the Ethiopian church, but I know that there's a lot more, even in Winnipeg, and I'd like to learn more. I'd like to photograph it.
What's the
And
best way to get a hold of you? What's the best way to find you and reach out to you if
uh,
somebody has a something they want to share?
right. I would say you can reach me through my Instagram account, or you can also message me through my website. I'm easily found through my website, and I'm always happy to get a message through there. So by all means, please, or if we happen to know each other or something, just call me up. Let's go for coffee.
Right on. All right. Thanks again, Colin. Thank you, everybody
Thank you.
who tuned in tonight on this Friday night and offered their questions. I hope everyone enjoyed this, got some value from it. And if you are a photographer and want to do something like this, reach out to me. I'd love to have you on here. We can just keep the conversations going. There's lots to talk about in terms of photography. So on that note, I'm going to say good night and thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.